Today it was Thomas's turn to do brake van rides. He didn't mind, but he was missing Annie and Clarabel a lot. Up and down he puffed all day long, giving visitors lots of rides. Children wanted photos of themselves inside Thomas's cab, and some mums and dads did too. Thomas's driver and fireman hands ached after signing visitors' reasonably priced autograph books all day long. Then Thomas noticed a little boy holding his ears. He seemed frightened at the sounds. Thomas then asked his driver why the little boy looked so nervous. Then asked the little boy's mum, who then explained her son had autism. But he was a big fan of Thomas all his life, but he felt very overwhelmed by Thomas's sheer size and the loud noises he made. Thomas's crew made a plan for later that afternoon. Once all the visitors had left, Thomas was ready to go back into the exhibition hall when he noticed the little boy and his mum walking towards them. Then his driver explained his plan. They were going to do something called a relaxed experience, but there was no big crowds, the music was turned down, and Thomas promised not to wheeze steam and blow his whistle loudly. Eventually the boy came over, and the guard let him wave the green flag, and quietly Thomas moved away with his brake van. Once they returned to the station, the driver invited the boy and his mum onto the footplate, and even let the little boy blow Thomas's whistle so he wouldn't be afraid of the sound as he knew where it was coming from. The little boy and his mum thanked the driver, fireman and guard and Thomas and got them to sign copies of his favourite railway series book. And the fireman gave the little boy a lump of Thomas's coal to take home with him, but he recommended giving it a coat of varnish as the dust would get everywhere otherwise. That evening, Thomas backed into the exhibition hall with a great big smile on his face. The other engines asked why, and Thomas explained to them about the little boy and his mum. Edward was enjoying himself, shunting back and forth doing the brake van rides. Lots of visitors came to see him, as he was such an old engine and still in very good condition and easily matched the other engines for popularity. Then over in the siding he noticed a new arrival, an engine just as old as him in his lovely old livery too. "Now, hello, I've not seen you before." "No, I've just come out of the paint shop. It's been repainted into my old livery. I do feel wonderful. Aren't you one of the Fat Controller's engines?" "Yes, we're here for 1 month for an exhibition." "You are lucky to have such a kind controller. I was nearly scrapped. Then I was bought for a new preserved railway." "What's a preserved railway?" "Old lines that have closed down. People are reopening them as tourist attractions so people can come and see what it was like to travel behind a steam engine. As soon them diesels will have taken over completely." Edward had seen scrapyards full of steam engines, and it always made him shiver at the thought of it. "Well, old boy, we need to give you a test run to make sure everything's working properly." "Excuse me, why don't you do my brake van rides while my crew stops for lunch?" "Ah, what a good idea, Edward. Would you like to do that, Jim?" "Oh, yes, please." Jim really did enjoy working again after such a long time, and the visitors loved him. Not only did they get to see the famous engines of Sodor, but Jim too. Quickly, the Preservation Society representative got to work handing out leaflets of the new railway opening that summer. That evening, Edward stayed outside to talk to Jim, and the next morning whistled goodbye as Jim set off for his new life. Henry was feeling rotten. He felt like his pipes were clogged up with ash and they just didn't feel good. He grumbled that he'd been given normal coal and not Welsh steam coal. Henry was very particular when it came to his coal, even though he didn't need his so-called special coal anymore because he'd been in a nasty accident, which had resulted in Henry being completely rebuilt. So now he could run on the same coal as all the other engines. but he kept playing up and saying it didn't suit him. He cost more to run than any other of the Fat Controller's engines. He refused to move until his special coal was delivered, and made such a fuss that a large crowd grew around him. So his driver and fireman made a plan. A few trucks of coal arrived for the engines to do their brake van rides. So one night when the train arrived, Henry's driver and fireman got to work. They laid one layer of Welsh steam coal on top of a truck of normal coal and painted the truck bright red. The driver had a mate who was a London bus driver, so he got the paint cheap. The next day, due to a change in the roster, Toby was to do the brake van ride and use the coal from the red truck. Toby's crew didn't know what Henry's driver and fireman had done the night before. He felt wonderful. The Welsh steam coal did him the world of good. Gone were his aching axles, and in its place a boiler so hot he needed plenty to drink. When Henry found out Toby had used his coal the next day, he created such a fuss that he really did injure himself. Problems today. I'm going to have to use duck to cover you, but you're not going back into the exhibition hall. Suddenly Henry was worried. It could rain, and he remembered the last time he made a fuss about that and what the Fat Controller had done to punish him.
And the Fat Director told Henry,
"We shall leave you there for always and always and always."
They cut a new tunnel through the hill, they took up the old rails, and they built a big brick wall in front of Henry. Now Henry can't get out, and he watches the trains rushing through the new tunnel. He's very sad because no one will ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again.
So Henry, you will move over to that siding and I will use your firebox to cook sausages for the visitors. Henry was speechless for once. He felt his face going redder than James's paintwork with embarrassment. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Henry, the great big galloping sausage. Today it was Gordon's turn to do brake van rides. Though being Gordon, he was really not keen on being seen pulling a dirty brake van, as he called it. He felt it didn't do his reputation any good as an express engine. Gordon arrived at the station where a group of visitors had gathered. A young girl commented to her granddad that he had told her he used to drive Flying Scotsman. Gordon shunted back in surprise as he thought one of his very famous brothers had seen him. "Steady, old boy." Gordon's driver and fireman let the little girl and her granddad in Gordon's cab. His driver and the granddad got into a long-winded and highly technical conversation on cylinder oils. And then Gordon started to doze off. When suddenly he started to move. Not at a nice control speed, but very fast. In fact, faster and faster. Gordon then noticed his driver and fireman on the platform. The granddad was at Gordon's controls. Then they stopped and the points changed and Gordon shot forward, through the gate and onto the main line. He sped along gathering speed. He tried to count telegraph poles, but they became a blur because he was going faster and faster. Then he overtook an HST, doing 125 miles per hour. That was odd for Gordon. HSTs haven't been invented yet. Then shock horror, as up in front a big clear sign read, "Stop, or you'll have a very big crash." The grandad opened Gordon's regulator wide and he sped forwards towards a pair of buffers. He shut his eyes as the buffers approached. Then he felt his buffers hit the buffers. "Wake up, Gordon, wake up!" Gordon was stunned. As he looked around, he was still at the station with everybody looking at him. Then Gordon realised he must have fallen asleep while his driver was talking to the grandad in his cab. He felt most embarrassed. James was absolutely loving all the attention he was getting in the exhibition hall. People were taking photos of him and even filming him too. A group of WI ladies painted him for a church fundraising appeal. Everybody loved James the Red Engine. His paint shone so brightly some visitors had to sit down at the sight of the most splendid engine of all. James was even more beside himself doing breakdown rides, showing off to passing trains on the main line and revelling in all the attention he was getting. He told the other engines endlessly that he, James, was the star attraction. He always hoped they'd agree, though normally a rude reply would come from one of them. James was so pleased the next day when he was told he was to feature on a television series called Railway Roundabout, and he had been picked to do breakdown rides for the film. The cameraman arrived and James was simmering with pride at the station. They loaded their equipment on and did some shots of James passing. Then they did some run-past shots of James. James asked them to do them from different angles to get his best sides and reflections from his paintwork. Then it happened. Steam poured out of somewhere and he couldn't move forwards or backwards. He tried but nothing. The camera kept rolling. Unfortunately, the other engines weren't in steam, so a diesel engine was sent to push James back into the exhibition hall. The diesel arrived and rescued the stranded James and his brake van. After shunting the brake van away, the diesel collected James and shunted him back into the exhibition hall. All this was filmed and later broadcast on television. And here we see the failed North Western Railway No. 5 being rescued by the very latest in British Railway diesel locomotives. The next day visitors didn't come to see James the splendid red engine, but they all came to see James the failed red engine, and years later the film would haunt James as it became available on video, DVD and all good streaming services. One morning as Percy was being prepared to do brake van rides that day, the manager walked up to him. "Percy, I have a special job for you today. I need you to shunt coaches and steam heat the carriages at the big station because their steam heat boiler has broken." "Oh goodness, Hector, what on earth is that?" "It's a steam locomotive. They burn coal and water, not like us diesels." "Oh, what a ghastly and inefficient thing it is." "Didn't you used to take them to the scrapyard?" "Oh yes, it was one of my favourite jobs. Really cleaned up those sidings and made the shed look much neater." "Oh, I couldn't agree more. They damage our paintwork with their ash and smuts." "What do you think it's doing here though? Why don't we ask?" "Oh, it's beneath an express engine like myself to do such a thing." "I say, what on earth are you doing here? This is a diesel shed and you're making our paintwork look simply dirty." "Oh, hello, I'm Percy. I'm here to steam heat your carriages for you." "Steam heat? We have a perfectly operable steam boiler in our carriage shed just for that job." "Well, that's true you did, but it's broken now, so I've been sent here to heat your carriages while it's being repaired." "Well, I hope you don't make too much noise and have too much soot and ash everywhere. We diesels like our sheds to look beautiful. The only mess around here is that little bit of oil dripping from underneath you." Oh, driver, stop the leak, stop the leak. Oh, it shall spoil my image. Oh, driver, do something." "Oh, for goodness sake, will you put a sock in it? I'd rather have a nice steam locomotive any day than you diesels. All you do is whine, whine, whine." Percy was shunting coaching stock into the platform for the mainline engines. He didn't mind. He enjoyed working hard and being useful, though he thought the diesels could learn a lesson or three, as they were sometimes very lazy, and then one day it happened. "Where is the diesel for this train?" "Oh, it's been a right day. The silly diesel's come out of the sheds, derailed itself right across the points. No other engines can get out. Though there is that small steam engine in the carriage sheds." "That seems like a sensible idea. I'll phone the yard manager." Percy puffed off to the station, passing the diesel sheds on his way. "Oh, you there," called Hector. "Do be a darling and get me the breakdown train. I seem to have had a slight problem." "Sorry, I haven't got time. Got to pull a passenger train. Passengers come first, you know. Just remember that." Oh, what a hurtful comment from a nasty little steam engine. It'll take me days to get over that comment. Oh, I could really cry, I simply could. Percy arrived at the station, and the passengers cheered. The guard then blew his whistle, and slowly but surely, slipping at first, he got underway, passing the diesel shed en route. Glad to see a proper engine on that train, not like these useless spam cans. Later that day, Percy moved Hector back into the diesel shed. Oh, I shall have to be washed. I have so much soot on me. You, snapped the yard manager, will learn how to be a proper engine, and an engine that concentrates on its work rather than its appearance. You work hard and you'll be cleaned. But until you do, you will not be cleaned any more. Oh, but I shall look so unsightly. If only I still had my useful steam engines, they'd get the job of 10 diesels done in an hour. The diesels were silent after that, and the yard manager turned to Percy. Would you like to work the passenger train for the next week? I've cleared it with the fat controller, now that the steam heat boiler has been fixed. Oh, yes, please, said Percy. Oh, excellent. The passengers will be pleased. They will actually get to their destinations on time for once. The diesels looked away, ashamed at their laziness. I promise to work hard from now on. One night, when the moon was high and shone brightly through the windows of the exhibition hall, Toby was awake. He looked around nervously from side to side. Was that just the floorboard squeaking, or was that the sound of the ghost driver? He shuddered as he could hear the footsteps walking towards him. He shut his eyes tight and opened them slowly. He could see a figure dressed in footplate clothes. The figure then faded away into the darkness. Toby didn't sleep at all that night. He told the other engines the next morning, who all said he was talking utter rubbish. No such thing. My driver's seen him on television. Thomas was hoping Percy wouldn't mention the time he had been spooked by Percy as the ghost engine. Then an old man walked into the exhibition hall to clean the engines, as he did each day before anybody arrived. James made a comment about the ghost driver to him. The old man looked sad and sat down on a seat where all the engines could see him. Ghost, you say? Yes, I saw him last night. That's because you're a tram engine. Well, because long ago I was a fireman to a driver called Bert, you see. He went on holiday and saw these fascinating little tram engines, and he was absolutely enthralled by them. He went on holiday each year to photograph them. What happened to him? Well, I'll tell you all a story. A long time ago, on a dark night when the world was at war, Bert and me were the crew on an ammunition train. When Bert noticed sparks from the engine had set light to the roof of the van behind us, he knew that if the train blew up here, it would cause destruction to a nearby town. So he brought the train to a stop and told me to uncouple the wagon from the train, then he'd move it away. So I did just that, and as soon as I was out, he moved the loco and the van away. He moved down the line, nearly out of sight. Then it happened. A tremendous explosion. Poor Bert didn't see the sun come up the next day, nor did his engine. Years later, people say that they've heard footsteps around the yard, and I'm in no doubt that Bert did visit you last night, Toby, as it was your line he used to visit each year, and he's probably just coming back to check that you're well. There's nothing to be afraid of. As the old man left the exhibition hall to get his cleaning cloth, a tear ran down Toby's cheek. Come to out, all the engines had tears too. Duck was very proud of being Great Western. In fact, he talked endlessly about it all day. Some days a large crowd would gather around him while he was explaining the complexities of empty coaching stock shunting. In fact, one man spoke to him all day about it and filled in his notebook as he was planning an ultra-realistic model railway which would run to real time. The other engines and crews grew a little weary of hearing about his great western ways, so they were rather glad when it was Duck's turn to do brake van rides. Peace at last, thought the other engines. Then Percy started talking about the mail train. Meanwhile, Duck went back and forth on the demonstration line, then noticed some coaches in a siding which could do with being properly arranged. So he convinced his driver this would interest the visitors to see some shunting demonstrations. Though unknown to Duck, the vacuum cylinders had been disconnected on one of the coaches, and its buckeye coupling was severely damaged. Duck enjoyed a good shunt with coaches. The visitors were taking lots of photos and looked on in amazement at Duck, his smooth stopping capabilities and his well-timed buffering up to the coaches. Then it happened. He buffered up to the old coach and it moved slowly at first, then gathered speed towards the buffer stops. Even worse was beyond the buffer stops, was Sir Topham Hatt's refreshment room selling wonderfully moist and fluffy cakes. Luckily the man serving the cakes, who coincidentally used to run a barber's shop before Duck smashed through the wall, could see what was about to happen. Skillfully he placed the cakes on a trolley and pushed them out the door, and it stopped without damaging a single crumb. Unfortunately the refreshment rooms was completely demolished by the coach. Luckily no one was hurt, well, apart from Duck's pride, that is.